بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. فالليلة ليلة العشرين، ليلة الاثنين، ليلة العشرين من شهر صفر الخامس وثلاثين وأربعمائة وألف من الهجرة، عام الخمسة وثلاثين وأربعمائة وألف من الهجرة. Tonight being the 20th night of the month of Safar, the night preceding al-Ithnain in the year 1435, we're going to continue with the translation of the lessons or Duroos al-Muhimmah li'amat al-Ummah li Shaykh bin Abdul bin Baz. Important lessons for the general Ummah as written by Shaykh Abdul ibn Abdullah ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. The translation of the explanation of our Shaykh Hafidhullah, Shaykh Abu Saalim ibn at-Taweel. And in the last class, we recapped once again the statement Alhamdulillah and finished it off with Rabbil Alameen. First of all, what is the first lesson of Duroos al-Muhimmah? These are the things that we should be memorizing and knowing, even if we don't memorize the actual book itself, which is good, at least to have an awareness of what we're going over. So does anybody remember what the first lesson of Duroos al-Muhimmah is? We said it's Surah al-Fatiha, وَمَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْ قِصَارِ السُّوَرِ مِنْ زَلْزَلَ إِلَى سُورَةِ النَّاسِ. It's Surah al-Fatiha and what is easy from the smaller surahs, beginning with Zalzala and ending with Surah al-Nas. Having them taught to us correctly, perfecting our qira'ah, talqihuha, right? Talqinuha. Having them taught to us correctly and memorizing them and having them explained in a decent fashion. So we're still in the lesson, the first lesson, which is Surah al-Fatiha and what is easy from the smaller surahs. And we've reached Surah al-Fatiha, the statement Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And we have a lot of benefit already from Shaykh Saalim Hafidhullah regarding that which preceded Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, from the introduction to the benefit of the Quran, the benefit of Surah al-Fatiha, the difference of the Quran as far as saying it's all the same, or are certain surahs different, or than others? Are they better than others, and things like this? We learned why Surah al-Fatiha is so important. We learned why the Basmala is not an ayah from Surah al-Fatiha. And we took the statement Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And we said that this statement, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, just as Surah al-Fatiha talks in its entirety about Tawheed, then this statement, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, in it is all three aspects of Tawheed. This one statement, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, in it is all three aspects of Tawheed. Does anybody remember how this one statement proves all three aspects of Tawheed? We said that the statement Alhamd, it means to mention Allah with His high qualities and perfect attributes. Right? So when we praise Allah, this is an establishment. We're praising Him because of what He's entitled to, or what He is described with, should I say. He is entitled to this praise. He is entitled to this praise because of what He is described with from the perfect names and attributes, which is an establishment of Tawheed al-Asma'i was-Sifat, the uniqueness of Allah in His names and His attributes. Because we say, Alhamdulillah, all praise is only for Allah. Right? All praise is only for Allah. Why is all praise only for Allah? Because Allah is the only one who is described with these perfect names and attributes, entitling Him to all praise. So this is an establishment of Tawheed al-Asma' was-Sifat. Likewise, in the statement Allah itself, is an establishment of Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, because the word Allah comes from the Arabic al-Ilah, or the one taken for worship. I.e., that thing that is taken for worship, and deservedly so, then this is what Allah's name is. Likewise, we said that since Allah is deserving of all of this praise, then that praise necessitates that He be worshipped. These attributes that He has that come from, or that entitle Him to this uniqueness in praise based on His names and His attributes, then that entitles Him to be worshipped. So the one that is the all-hearer, and the all-seer, and the all-knower, and the able, and the all-wise, then these things entitle Him to be worshipped alone. So that is how we establish Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And as far as establishing Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, which is the third aspect of Tawheed, then we said it's in the statement, Rabb al-Alameen, Lord of al-Alameen. And al-Alameen means everything besides Allah. Everything besides Allah. So if He is the Lord of al-Alameen, then He is the Lord of everything besides Himself, or everything other, or everything else, should we say. So therefore He is alone in His rububiyyah. Now, and we talked about the fact that Allah Azza wa Jalla has ability over all things. He is their Lord. He is the one who provides for them and creates them and determines their affairs, and He gives to whom He wills and He takes away from whom He wills. Or He gives kingdom to whom He wills and He takes kingdom away from whom He wills. And He gives honor to whom He wills and He disgraces whom He wills. In His hand is all goodness and He has ability over all things. All of these are from the aspect of Him being the Lord or the Rabb of everything that exists. Him being the Rabb, meaning that He alone is their creator, their owner, and their governor or the regulator of their affairs. That He is munfaridun bil khalq wal mulk wal tadbir. That He is singled out with creation. He is the only creator. He is the only owner of everything. And He is the only governor of all affairs, the regulator of everything that occurs. So He is in control of everything. Then we talked about the statement, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And we said that these are two of Allah's names. That these are two of Allah's names that prove the attribute of mercy. Ismani lillah yadullani ala sifat al-Rahman, that prove the attribute of mercy. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim are two names of Allah that prove the attribute of mercy. But we said that there's a difference between the two of them. Does anybody remember the difference between Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim? We said that Ar-Rahman was sifatun dhatiyah, a self-attribute, an attribute describing who Allah is. He is the Rahmat al-Wasi'ah, the one that is full of mercy, the one who His mercy is vast. Right? This is a sifatun dhati. It's just who He is. Ar-Rahman, ala wazni fa'lan, to be full of something. Al-imtila. Right? Ar-Rahman, the one who is full of mercy. The Rahma al-Wasi'ah, the one who is mercy covers everything. And we said Ar-Rahim was a sifatun fi'liyah. These are important terms. Sifatun dhatiyah, Ar-Rahman, a self-attribute. This is who Allah is. بغض النظر عن إيصال ذلك الرحمة لمن يشاء. This is who He is without even considering is He going to give mercy or not. He is the full of mercy. Sifatun dhati, it's just who He is. And then we said Ar-Rahim was a sifatun fi'liyah, or an attribute of action. This attribute shows His action, right? And that He gives mercy to whom He wills. The Rahma al-Wasila, the one who His mercy is connected or arrives or is given to the one that He chooses. So the difference between Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, they both show mercy. But Ar-Rahman is the Rahma al-Wasi'ah, the one who is full of mercy. And Ar-Rahim is the Rahma al-Wasila, the one who gives His mercy. And then we talked about the fact that the people of the Sunnah, before going to that, I just want to remind us the benefit in all of these things. Wallahi, a lot of times we hear these things and we think that it's just talk, right? We think that somebody's just saying a principle over and over again, and it's like, for what purpose, right? How is this going to benefit me in my daily life? Not even just in the aspect of the knowledge that you're going to get from it, but it's also going to benefit you in other ways. Think about the conversations and the dawah that you give. When we debate with a Christian, one of the first things we tell them, and this is my statement to you also, you can understand some of the benefit of why we're learning these things, right? Because the Muslim needs to be upon knowledge about his religion. When we debate with a Christian, one of the first things we tell them is, this Trinity isn't in your Bible. If it was so important, why isn't it in the Bible? Right? If this was God's message to mankind, how come he forgot to put it in the book? Right? Show me where it's at. But when we look at Islam, what's the most important thing in Islam? Tawheed. Somebody comes to you and says, okay, if Tawheed is so important, show me where it's at in the Quran. Where is it at in the Quran? It's everywhere, but where would the first place it be at? The first ayat of the Quran. The first ayat of the Quran is what? Huh? What's the first ayat of the Quran? Remember we said Bismillah is in the ayah, right? What's the first ayat of the Quran? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, does it prove all three aspects of Tawheed? So the Muslim doesn't have to go past the first ayat of the Quran to establish the most important thing in his religion. Which one of those two da'wahs make more sense? That Allah Azza wa Jal wanted us to know about Tawheed. So He made the first ayat in the Quran explain all of Tawheed, or that He left it a mystery, the aspect of the Trinity, and never mentioned it in the book to begin with. The benefit in learning these things is not just so that you can know yourself, which is a great benefit in and of itself, but it also is going to elevate your understanding and your level of thinking and your ability to give da'wah. Right? We said Surah Al-Fatiha is al-Quran. It has all of the meanings of the Quran in it. When you tell somebody something, usually the most important thing is what you tell them first. So when we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, we see that the most important thing came first in the tartib of the Quran. Right? If you don't read nothing past Surah Al-Fatiha, you've read the entirety of the meaning of the Quran. Because all of the Quran goes back to Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? This is from the greatest aspects of da'wah. Right? Just telling them Surah Al-Fatiha and being able to explain it to them and what it means will show the completeness of Islam. Because Surah Al-Fatiha, in it is the completeness of the Quran. And in the Quran is a guidance for those who have Iman. Or for those who have taqwa, right? J. So we said Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, two names that prove the attribute of mercy. And the difference between them is that Ar-Rahman is sifatun dhatiyya bil rahmatil wasi'ah. That Ar-Rahman is the one who is full of mercy, or described with the vast mercy. That's just who He is, a self-attribute. Well, Ar-Rahim sifatun fi'liyya bil rahmatil wasi'ah. That Ar-Rahim is an attribute of action, the one who gives His mercy, right? The Rahmah al-Wasi, or the one who His mercy goes out and reaches that, or He gives His mercy to whom He wills. J. Then we said that the position of the people of the Sunnah regarding the names and the attributes of Allah in general, and specifically regarding mercy in this aspect, is that we establish it. We establish it in a manner that befits His majesty. And we believe that Allah has mercy. Does anybody remember what we said is the meaning of establishing the names and the attributes of Allah? Right? We said when we establish ihkamuha, when we establish them, what does that mean? We said that it means that we establish the name. Right? This was in the other tafsir class, Tafsir Saalim. But we said Shaykh Saalim basically described the same thing. We establish the name. So when Allah says He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, we establish that name to be His name. Unlike the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah. Right? The Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah, or the Jahmiyyah, they say Allah doesn't have these names. You can't give Him these names. Right? So we establish the name. This is part of establishing the attribute of Allah. I mean the names and the attributes. We establish the sifa, or the attribute that that name comprises. So Ar-Rahman has what attribute in it? The merciful, his name, the full of mercy, has what attribute that it shows? It shows the attribute of mercy. So we establish the attribute and we say Allah indahu rahmah, lillahi rahmah. Right? Allah has rahmah. We also establish the action that that attribute necessitates. If Allah has mercy, then what is that action that results from that attribute? That He gives mercy to whom He wills. Right? So we establish the name, the attribute, and the action. نثبت الاسم والوصف والفعل لله على وجه يليق بجلاله. We establish the name, the attribute, and the action for Allah in a way that befits His majesty. But the people of innovation, they deny these things. So the Jahmiyyah, they say that Allah doesn't have these names. Allah is not called Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and Allah doesn't have mercy. The Mu'tazila, they say that Allah doesn't have mercy. You can call Him Ar-Rahman, but He doesn't have mercy. Right? Don't say Allah has mercy. Then we come to another group called the Asha'ira. الَّذِينَ عَامَتْ بِهِمْ الْبَلْوَى, the ones that have caused a great affliction in the Muslim world. The Asha'ira, they say that, okay, you can say Allah is Ar-Rahman, and you can say Allah has mercy, but His mercy isn't really mercy. His mercy is a desire to give reward, or it is the reward itself. So they change the meaning. But when you ask them, okay, so does Allah have mercy or not? After they bend and twist and bend and twist, they all come back to the same statement, which is to deny the attribute of mercy for Allah. So the Mu'tazila, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, and the Asha'ira, even though they have differences, all come back to the same thing. And that is that they deny the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And when we ask them, why do you deny these attributes of Allah? Why do you deny the mercy of Allah? They say because it's a sifatul da'f. It's an attribute of weakness. And they say that it doesn't befit Allah. We say to them, when somebody tells us that Allah said that He is Ar-Rahman, and that means that He has mercy, but they say, no, that doesn't befit Allah. How can you say Allah is Ar-Rahman? Right? I mean, when you think about it, you have mercy. So are you like Allah? So therefore Allah can't have mercy because it will make Him and you the same. Right? When somebody says that to us, what's our response to them? When they say that this doesn't suit Allah, it's not befitting that you say Allah has mercy. What's our response? We say that our response is, if it didn't befit Allah, then why did He describe Himself with it? If it didn't befit Allah, then why did His messenger describe Him with it? Who knows better about Allah? Allah and His messenger or anyone else? So when these people say that this attribute doesn't befit Allah, we say if it didn't befit Allah, then why did Allah describe Himself with it? Right? Then we said also in closing the review of what we talked about last class, we said that as far as to the Asha'ira specifically, they say that the rahmah of Allah is the desire to give reward. Iradu isal al-thawab. The desire to give reward. Or they say that the rahmah huwa thawab nafsu, that the mercy is the reward itself. We say, why did you all do that? Why did you all change the meaning? They say because the intellect establishes the ability to give reward, or the desire to give reward, but the intellect doesn't establish mercy for Allah. Right? This is what they say. And this might be, more than some of you need, but those of you who are able to understand, this is very important. And those of you who it's not, make sure you ask questions about this, because this is the usul of our religion. This is the foundation of our religion. They say that the intellect shows that Allah can have a desire or a want, but it doesn't establish that Allah can have mercy. and they use a bunch of logic to establish them. But we respond to them by a simple statement. One, the intellect's establishment that Allah can have mercy is easier than what they try to establish. Because if we ask anybody, from the smartest to the most common person, the old lady in the marketplace, to the doctor in the university, if we ask any one of them, does Allah have mercy? The first thing they're going to say is, yes. It just makes sense. So we say that their claim that the intellect doesn't support that Allah has mercy is rejected. And then we say to them also that even if the intellect doesn't support it, then the Quran and the Sunnah established it. And if the Quran and the Sunnah established it, then we have no more need to figure out what our intellect say. And this is a very important principle. If the Quran and the Sunnah establish something, then there's no more need for our intellect regarding that. If the Quran and the Sunnah say something clearly, the burden of you trying to figure it out is removed. The burden of you trying to put your intellect to make it make sense is gone. Believe in it as it came. Allah said He has mercy, that He is Ar-Rahman. Believe in it as it came, even if it doesn't make sense. But the correct opinion for those who have intelligence is that it makes sense that Allah would have mercy. And the only other thing we talked about that we skipped from the review is the hadith that Lillahi tis'a mi'atu rahmah, that Allah has 100 mercies. He made one of them that which mercy is shown between each other and the creation, and He held 99 to have mercy with it on the Day of Judgment. Right? And this shows the greatness of Allah's mercy. That every aspect of mercy that you think in this life, from the mercy of a mother to her child, or a friend to a friend, or a parent or a father to a son, right? All of this mercy is just 1/100th of the mercy that Allah Azza wa Jalla has in store for His servants. But like we said, the main thing that we want to, drill on right now is the refutation of the people of innovation regarding their stance of the names and the attributes of Allah. So they deny them all, and they say the intellect doesn't establish it. The intellect doesn't prove it. But we say that, one, the intellect does prove it. And we say, secondly, that even if the intellect didn't prove it, then the Quran and the Sunnah prove it. So there's no need for the intellect after that. We'll pick back up with where Shaykh Saalim, where we stopped from last class. So we'll say,
ثم أن العقل لو لم يدل على صفة الرحمة فإنه لا ينفي صفة الرحمة.
Shaykh Saalim Hafidhullah, he says, and then, right, we said that the intellect establishes mercy. And even if it didn't establish mercy, the Quran and the Sunnah establishes mercy. He goes on to say, and even if the intellect didn't establish mercy, then it doesn't negate the possibility of Allah having mercy. Right, they say that the intellect doesn't establish mercy. He says that even if the intellect didn't establish the attribute of mercy, it doesn't negate the attribute of mercy. Does that make sense?
ما ينفي فالعقل لا ينفي صفة الرحمة بل يثبتها بل حتى لو لم يدل عليه العقل ولم يثبت العقل يكفي أن الله وصف نفسه بالرحمة والرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم وصف الله عز وجل بالرحمة.
So he says this is the conciseness of the statement, that even if the intellect didn't establish mercy for Allah, if it didn't make sense, or if the intellect didn't prove in and of itself that Allah had mercy, then it doesn't disprove. It doesn't disprove. But the correct opinion is that the intellect proves it. That the intellect proves it. And even if it didn't prove it, it doesn't disprove it. And even if it didn't do that, then the Quran and the Sunnah prove it, so there's no need for the intellect after that. So the concise answer to this is that if somebody says the intellect doesn't prove it, we say even if the intellect didn't prove it, it doesn't deny it. Right? They come and say, well, the intellect doesn't establish, it doesn't agree that we describe Allah with having mercy. We say that even if the intellect doesn't establish that, it doesn't deny it. Right? It's not impossible to think that Allah could have mercy. right? It's not something that's unimaginable. It's not something that's unthought of. The intellect, even if you say it doesn't prove it, it doesn't deny it. But the correct opinion is that it proves it. So not only is it not possible that Allah could have mercy, it makes sense that Allah has mercy. The intellect establishes it. It just makes sense that Allah has mercy. And even if the intellect didn't establish it, the Quran and the Sunnah establish it. So whether it makes sense or not, whether the intellect establishes it or not, the Quran and the Sunnah establish it. Do we understand that tadarruj? Like, I want to explain a little bit, because this is very important why a lot of it seems like philosophy, and it's like, why am I having to learn so much about it? And wallahi, the truth of it is that if it wasn't for the people of innovation, we wouldn't have had to learn so much about it. I ask you, does Allah have mercy? What's your answer? Yes, plain and simple. Your mind doesn't even go there. But when the people of innovation start to go into detail, it was necessary that we go into detail in their refutation. And it's important that we understand what is being said by this, right? They say things like the intellect doesn't establish it. What does that mean, right? There's a whole bunch of evidence that they use to support that. And this is not the place for us to get into it. But they bring up all of this intellectual evidence to say why it doesn't make sense that Allah has mercy. But we will respond to them saying what first? Even if your claim that the intellect doesn't establish it, that just common sense doesn't show that Allah has mercy by it in and of itself, then even if it doesn't establish it, it doesn't deny it. So if somebody came to you and says, is it impossible for Allah to have mercy? What would you say? You say, no, it's not impossible. I can see how that could happen. So even if the intellect doesn't establish it, it doesn't deny it, right? But if I said, is it possible for you to be in China and America at the same time? What would you say? It's not possible. The intellect denies it, right? Common sense won't let it happen, right? So not only does the intellect not deny the fact that Allah has mercy, it also establishes it. It just makes more sense. If you have mercy, who gave you the ability to have mercy? Allah. Is having mercy a good quality or a bad quality? It's a good quality. So, the one who gave you this good quality has more right to have it than you do. If he's the one who gave you the ability to have this good quality, doesn't it just make sense that he has that good quality himself? Right? You have eyesight. Is having eyesight a good quality or a bad quality? It's a good quality. The one who gave you that good quality, the one who gave you the ability to see, doesn't it just make sense that he has that quality himself? Right? So not only does the intellect not deny it, it establishes it. You don't need anything more than just to think and say, yeah, Allah got mercy. But even if the intellect didn't do that, even if your mind couldn't wrap itself around the fact that Allah has mercy, you're not in need. Because the Quran and the Sunnah established it, so once the Quran and the Sunnah established it, you are no more in need to figure it out on your own. So this is how we respond to them in everything they say about the names and the attributes of Allah. Because this is how they deny them all. They say, no, Allah can't have it because you have it. Allah can't be described with it because it doesn't befit Him, because the intellect doesn't establish it. So it's important to understand the fundamentals of the refutation, so that way when we go to the next stage, which is actually getting into the refutation, we understand the steps that we're using. Right? So I'll say it one more time just so it's clear. And I don't like to repeat over and over, but it's important that we understand. The intellect doesn't deny that Allah has mercy. So if they come and says the intellect doesn't establish it, we say even if it doesn't establish it, it doesn't deny it. But the correct opinion is that the intellect, not only does it not deny it, it establishes it. It establishes the fact that Allah has mercy. Just you thinking on your own could come to the conclusion that is correct, that Allah has mercy. But even if you couldn't come to that conclusion, even if your intellect doesn't establish it, the Quran and the Sunnah establish it. So what do we need after the book and the Sunnah? واضح؟
وأما قوله الرحمة صفة ضعف لا تليق بالله، فيقول لهم الإرادة. ما معنى الإرادة؟ هي ميل القلب لحول ما ينفع ودفع ما يضر. إرادة أن يميل القلب. قال لا، هذه إرادة مخلوق ميل القلب. إن الصح إرادة ميل القلب، وهذه رحمة المخلوق اللي هي الضعف. أما رحمة الله ليست كذلك.
Now he's going to take us to refute another one of their statements. If we will remember back a second ago, we said that the things that they used to deny, this is my explanation to bring it all back together before I translate his statement. We remember they denied these attributes of Allah for three reasons, specifically mercy. One, they said the intellect doesn't establish it. Right? We already refuted that. Two, they said that it doesn't befit the majesty of Allah. It doesn't befit Allah. Do we remember how we refuted that it doesn't befit Allah's majesty? How do we refute their statement that it doesn't befit Allah's majesty? Exactly. If it didn't befit Allah, why did Allah describe himself with it? The third thing that they said is that this mercy is a characteristic of weakness. They say mercy is a weakness. It's a sifatul da'f. It's a type of weakness, right? It's a softness. When you have mercy, you're soft. You're not, right? So they say that doesn't befit Allah, that he have a characteristic of weakness. So the Shaykh Hafidhullah, he said, okay, if this is your statement, then we say, okay, what is want? What is irada? Because remember, the Asha'ira, they say that mercy means what? Mercy means the want of Allah to give reward. That Allah wants to give reward. This is what mercy is. Right? The desire that Allah has to give reward. Or the reward itself. So he says, if you all say that ar-Rahmah, sifatul da'f, that mercy is a characteristic of weakness, then what is irada? What is this want or this desire? Right? Linguistically, when we talk about want for the human beings, right, they say it's mailul qalbi ila jalbi ma yanfa'uhu wa daf'u ma yadhar, right? It's the leaning of the heart to acquire that which will benefit and keep away that which will cause harm, right? When you say what is want, what is desire, it's the mailul qalb, like the leaning of the heart's inclination to get that which will benefit and push away that which will cause harm. Right? You want to get married. Your heart leans to getting that benefit of having children and pushing away that harm of falling into zina. Right? This is what irada is regarding the humans. Right? So when you say to the Ash'ari that this is what want is, he'll say no. This is want in the case of humans. But to say that it's the inclination of Allah's heart, this is not correct. You can't say that about Allah. Want with Allah is different than it is with the humans. This is what they'll say. Right? So he says, okay then, what about mercy? Why isn't the mercy of Allah different than the mercy of the humans? If the want of Allah is different than the want of the humans, then shouldn't the mercy of Allah likewise just be different than the mercy of the humans? If we say that the want is the inclination of our heart to get which will cause a benefit and push away which will cause a harm, can anything harm Allah? Can anything benefit Allah? Does Allah get any benefit from anything we do? No. It doesn't benefit Allah any. It doesn't harm Allah any. Right? So if want regarding us meant to get a benefit to keep away harm, but it doesn't mean that with Allah, then doesn't it make sense that if mercy with us means a type of weakness, that it doesn't mean that with Allah? Does that make sense? Jay.
كل شيء تليق به والمخلوق رحمته على قدره. المخلوق على قدره. المخلوق لو رأى جارية تجلد 100 جلدة لأنها زانية لأخذته الرائحة وقال مسكين حد من هذه الدرجة جاء أخذوا فرصة 100 جلدة. فرحمته ايش اخوان؟ ضعيفة. بعض الناس يرى بهيمة الأنعام تنحر أو تذبح لا يريد يردد كذا خاطرة الطلي هذا يجرون من تحتهم ملدين يقول لا ردد خطير شو لك خروف أكبر من الزبير صح؟ ضعيف قلبه، هذه مو رحمة، هذا ضعف. أما رحمة الله وسعت كل شيء، رحمة كاملة.
Now, so he says, so as far as the mercy of Allah, then it is a mercy that encompasses everything in a manner that befits His majesty. Right? And as far as the mercy of the created beings, then their mercy is in proportion to who they are. Their mercy is appropriate for who they are. It's in proportion to who they are. Right? The human beings, they see somebody getting whipped 100 lashes. Right? You see somebody commit zina and they get whipped 100 lashes. Right? What's going to happen? After 50, 60, you're going to start to, get taken by compassion. Oh, this poor person is getting whooped so much, right? This isn't mercy. This is weakness, right? This is that weakness that we talked about, right? Sometimes there's a type of person that sees an animal getting slaughtered, right? They want to go and save the animal and things like that. Is this mercy? This is that type of weakness. That's the mercy of the human beings. But the mercy of Allah encompasses everything and befits His majesty.
ليس به شيء من النقص، بل هو السلام من كل نقص وعيب، القدوس المنزه عن العيوب والنقائص. انتبهتم؟ فنقول حينئذ الله على المتصف بصفات الكمال والجلال الرحمة غير الرحمة.
Now, so he says, so Allah's mercy, it doesn't have any deficiencies, right? He has this mercy that has no deficiencies in it, right? He's al-Quddus, the one there's no deficiency in his, he's described with being al-Quddus, the one who is glorified or purified from any deficiency, right? So His mercy is complete. It has no deficiencies in it like the mercy of the human beings, right? So this is what we believe about all of Allah's attributes, that all of His attributes are complete. They have no deficiencies in them.
سبحانه وتعالى بخلاف ما ذهب إليه البدع من إنكار اسم الرحمن والرحيم أو من تحريف لهذه الصفة وجعل عليه صفة الإرادة أو الثواب نفسه. ثم نقول أيهما أكثر ورودا في كتاب الله، الرحمة ولا الإرادة؟ لم يسمى الله نفسه المريد.
Right, so he says, so this is how the people of the Sunnah are, right? They establish all of the attributes of Allah without any deficiency in them, contrary to the people of innovation, right? Contrary to the people of innovation, whether they negate the attributes, right? Some of them negate them in totality, or some of them try to change the meanings, right? Some of them try to change the meanings. Then he gives a fourth refutation to all of this, right? The first one had to do with the fact that the intellect establishes it, and even if the intellect didn't establish it, the Quran and the Sunnah establish it, and the intellect doesn't deny it. That's the first refutation to their claim, right? The second one was that it doesn't befit Allah's majesty. If it didn't befit Allah's majesty, Allah wouldn't have mentioned it about Himself. The third one is about it being a characteristic of weakness, and that characteristic of weakness is in relation to the humans, that their mercy isn't complete. Their mercy isn't perfect in nature, like the mercy of Allah. Their mercy has deficiencies. As for the mercy of Allah, then there's no deficiency in it, right? Unlike the mercy of the humans that might have some deficiencies. Another way that you can refute these statements that they make is that which one comes more in the Quran? Which description comes more in the Quran? Allah describing Himself with having mercy, or Allah describing Himself with having want? Right? All throughout the Quran we find Allah describing Himself as the merciful, the giver of mercy, right? And He never once named Himself the wanter, right? There's not any of Allah's names that is al-Murid, right? Allah didn't describe Himself in the Quran and name Himself in the Quran or the Sunnah as being al-Murid, right? So this shows us that mercy is more suitable to be established than the other.
غاية ما جاء في كتاب الله أنه أراد ويريد.
He says that the most that you will find in the book of Allah regarding this is the establishment of the fact that Allah does want, right? Past and present. That's the most you'll find, is that Allah had want and has want. That Allah, and He wants to do things and wanted to do things. Right? This is the most you'll find establishing want for Allah. Not need when we say want, but a desire to do.
وإذا أراد شيئا يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر.
He brings some ayat, right? إنما قوله إذا أراد شيئا. Verily his statement when he wanted something, right? إنما يريد بكم. Verily he wants for you, right? Showing that Allah wanted and wants, past and present.
لكن الرحمة الرحمن الرحيم كذلك أسماء أخرى تدل على الصفة. الرؤوف طيب يرحم ذو رحمة كتب عرش الرحمة رحمته وسعت كل شيء سبقت رحمته ايش؟ غضبا. انظر يا ثاني رحمة الله أكثر من صفة الإرادة.
He says, but when we come to rahmah, how many manifestations of this do you see in the Quran, right? You find the word ar-Rahman, ar-Rahim. You find attributes that have relation to it, like ra'uf, right? Compassion. You find, and he just mentions ayat after ayat where this word or this description comes up, right? يَرْحَمُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ رَحْمَةً يَسْبِقُ رَحْمَتُهُ غَضَبًا, right? His mercy will precede his anger. He's written on himself mercy, right? All of these ayats establishing the mercy of Allah. They are more abundant than that which established the attribute of simple want or desire to do.
فلا بد للمسلم أن يؤمن بما وصف الله جل وعلا به نفسه وقال عن نفسه الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم. نكتب على قدر الله تعالى أعلم.
He says, so therefore it's necessary on the Muslim that he believe in what Allah Azza wa Jalla has described himself with it, and that he believe that what Allah has said about himself when Allah says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, right? And then he says we'll suffice ourselves with this amount because this was the end of their first lesson. Their first lesson was 52 minutes, right? It took us about 3 lessons to do 52 minutes, or 4, this is the 4th lesson, to do 52 minutes, right? So we see the amount of time it's going to take us to do these classes. But the reason why we take it so slow is because what's the rush? What is the rush? The goal is to make sure we know about all of these things, right? So what I'm going to do, make sure that he's at the end of his class and there's no questions and answers that will benefit us by playing the audio until the beginning of the next class, and then we'll stop the audio. And then we want to go over very quickly amongst ourselves what we went over in this first class, right? Because our goal is not just to sit here. We take so much time, not just to hear it and say it over and over again, but so that when we leave the class, we don't have to come back to it again. And we know everything that we did in that class. So it'll take us 4 classes to do 1. But the reason is hopefully that at the end of that 4th class, we know everything that was in that 1 class. And after 4 years, we completed a year. And after 40 years, we completed 10 years. So inshallah, if Allah allows us to stay on this methodology, after 40 years, we'll have a little bit of knowledge, inshallah.
أو جئت بطفل لك قلت اقرأ عليه. الشيخ كل عافيك الله تقرأ على الولد هذا طول الليل يبكي معك. أيضا استرقيت أنت. فالاسترقاء طلب الرقية سواء طلبتها لنفسك أو لغيرك.
This question seems like it's regarding general questions and answers. This question is just regarding somebody asking about, most likely because we can't hear the question, but from the answer it seems like that he's asking the question about the 70,000 who will enter paradise. You all know that hadith, 70,000 will enter paradise without any reckoning. It'll be the ones who la yastarqoon, the ones who don't seek ruqya and don't see omens, and they trust in their Lord, right? And it seems like the questioner asked the question about a child of his that is sick. Is it okay for him to give ruqya to him? And will it, remove him from being included in that hadith? This is what it seems that the question is. I don't know because I can't hear the question. But the Shaykh Hafidhullah, he answers it simply saying that, if the child is sick, give ruqya to him. Read on him. And as far as yastarqun, seeking ruqya, then this applies to a person who goes out and seeks that for himself. He goes out and looks for it. But as far as if it just gets done, whether he does it to himself or someone else does it to him without him seeking it out, then it doesn't remove him from being included in those, from having the possibility of being included in those 70,000, because it says that they don't seek ruqya. Or instead, if somebody does it, then it doesn't negate that.
لا تسترقي. تفضل.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على فهم سؤال في فهم المعاني على حسب الوجه الحقيقي يكون القلب والعقل
فهم القرآن
في تدبر في القلب ولا الاثنين نشكر القلب والعقل.
يعني تفهم بعقلك ولا بقلبك؟ تدبر القرآن بقلبك ولا بعقلك؟ هم في تلازم، ما يصير إنسان عقل بدون قلب ولا قلب بدون عقل. بل حتى أن هناك كلام ويوضحه علماءنا أن العقل في القلب ليس في الرأس، في القلب. واستدلوا بقوله جل وعلا أم لهم قلوب لا يعقلون بها. إذن العقل يكون في القلب.
It seems like this question, like I say, once again, I can't hear the questions that well, but from the answers, you can know the question. It seems like this question is about when one reads the Quran, should he read it and ponder it with his mind or with his intellect? Should I say with his intellect or with his heart? When he's pondering the Quran and trying to think about the Quran, should he, be pondering it with his mind or his intellect, should I say, or his heart? Right? Does that make sense to you all or not make sense, right? Or how are you understanding the Quran? Are you using your intellect or are you using your heart, right? The Shaykh Hafidhullah, he says that baynahuma talazum, that there's a connection between the two of them, and that it's not possible to ponder it with one of them and not the other. And he said instead there is an opinion which is the more correct opinion, that the intellect is in the heart. One's intellect is in his heart and not in his head. Right? And this is an important issue. One's intellect is in his heart and not in his head. And the proof of this is Allah's statement, will they not have hearts that think about it? Will they not have hearts, qulub yaqiluna biha, right? That will have intellect regarding it. So the intellect is in the heart. So in the pondering of the Quran, it's going to be with the heart and the intellect, because the intellect is in the heart and not in the head.
كلام الله عز وجل هو كلام الله عز وجل فيه نور، فلما تقبلها القلب بصدق أنارت له قلبه وزيادة
ما في شك، يعني كلام الله نور، لكن إذا وجد المحل المناسب له. يعني يقول الله عز وجل إن في ذلك ذكرى لمن كان له قلب أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد. هذه الذكرى بالنسبة لمن ليس له قلب سليم لا تزيده إلا نفورا، كأنهم حمر مستنفرة فرت من القصص. شوف، ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. يعني إذا وجد الذكر والقرآن والذكر قلبا يستقبل ومحلا صالحا، جاءت هذه الآثار، اطمئن القلب واستنار القلب وعقل وتدبر. ولذلك القرآن يكون بشرى واطمئنان ونور وهداية لمن تقبله، وفي المقابل يكون حجة على من لم يتقبله، ويكون نفورا ويكون عمى. شوف لماذا؟ لأنه ما تقبل. فلا بد من أن يصادف محلا صالحا لتقبله، وحينئذ هذا هو السر. هذا هو السر. واحد يسمع القرآن فيخشع ويبكي، وآخر يسمع القرآن فيستهزئ. السبب اختلاف القلوب. هذا قلب.
Now we'll stop it halfway in that. I couldn't hear the question again. He was asking, it seemed like about describing the speech of Allah as being a light and things like that. And the Shaykh is getting into a very good benefit, which we'll try to summarize and not, go word for word with. But he says that, and I'm trying to remember the ayah. The ayah escaped me. It's a dhikra for those who have hearts, right? Or listen while they're witnessing. Meaning that the Quran, it is a reminder and a benefit for those who their hearts are open to accepting it, and who their hearts are suitable to receive its message. So for them it will be a light and a guidance and a reminder and a cure and so forth. But as far as those who their hearts are closed to it and don't accept it, then it will be a witness against them on the day of judgment. So the Quran has its effect on the heart that is open to receiving. But as far as the one whose heart is not like that, then it will be an evidence against him on the day of judgment. It will establish the evidence against him. And he says, and this is the secret behind why one person might hear the Quran and cry and be affected, right? And another person will hear the same ayah and it not affect him in any bit, right? What's the reason or the secret behind that? The secret behind that is the differences in the heart, right? The differences in the heart is what changes the effect of what the Quran has on a person, right? This is similar, this is similar like what we talked about in Tafsir Surah Al-Baqarah, Hudan lil-Muttaqeen. It's a guidance for those who have taqwa, right? Because their hearts have they have the openness to accept that which Allah has come with in the Quran, but the other ones, their hearts are closed to it.
ممكن تعرض صغيرة؟ لا العادة يلا حبيبي يشتكي الرحيم لمن لا يرحمه، يعني يشتكي منه لا ينسون فلا نصبر هذه. لازم تعرف هذا القراء يا اخوان، ما هي